Hello, I'm Hazel from Hazel Patterns, and today we are going to be making this, the gorgeous glasses case. The gorgeous glasses case is a really straightforward pattern. So if you're a beginner, welcome to you. I have put extra sections on at the beginning of this video which show you how to use the interfacing, the fusible fleece, and most importantly, how to use the pattern. If you're a more experienced sewer, you can see in the description below I have put the chapters in so you can skip past that and get straight onto the sewing. Let's get on with it. So the first thing we need to do is cut out all the pattern pieces. You've got 4 pages of pattern pieces plus the cutting chart, which is going to help you with laying everything out and deciding what to cut. Once I've cut my pieces out, I like to just mark them with a highlighter pen just so I can work out which pieces to cut from which fabric. Now, the strap piece on this is in 2 pieces, and I've given you a little joining tab, so I'll show you how I like to join mine. Just using some boring old school glue. I've got a scrap piece of paper down, and I'm going to match the tab, match the boxes. And there we go. All ready to cut out. We're going to interface before we cut out our pattern pieces, and you might notice that 2 of the pattern pieces don't actually require interfacing. So before we actually interface, I'm going to cut off a strip for the strap and the strap connector. Now you can either mark this with a ruler and cut it out with scissors, or you can do like I'm doing and cut it with your rotary cutter. Now we're going to interface our fabric and lining. So take your 2 fabrics, you've got your main fabric and your lining. You're not going to see the whole thing on screen here because of the size of the fabric, but what I like to do is I like to put both pieces as close together as you can, and then you can interface them in one go and cut them apart afterwards. So depending on what interfacing you're using, you need to put the textured side down. So I don't know if you can see there, it's dotty on this one, but it might be shiny instead. And then just lay it over your fabric. You might find you're okay if you use a steam iron, but on the instructions on most interfacings it says to actually use a damp cloth and a dry iron, so that's what we're going to do. Obviously try not to move everything underneath the cloth. I do like to use a pretty tea towel. There we go. And then what you're doing, you don't iron like normal. You're not going to slide your iron around. You're literally going to press it like this. So it'll probably need longer than I'm doing at the moment, but I'm going to do a first pass and then see if it needs more. Yep, you can see the bits I've missed. because that bit hasn't joined, but the rest of it has. So there we go. So that's joined quite nicely. And when I finish doing this, I'll cut the pieces apart and we can get ready to cut out. The cutting layout's really straightforward for this pattern. So fabric and lining, you've got your case and you've got your flap. So I'm just going to draw around these with pencil because that's the easiest way to get a nice neat finish, and then we'll cut them out. There we go, there's the first flap. You can see if you do it like this, you get a pretty accurate finish. I'm going to do the rest of the outer. I'm going to do the lining and I'm going to cut out the fleece in the same way. So here we are, I have cut out all of the fabric pieces and I have gone ahead and cut out the fusible fleece pieces in the same way. Now we need to get these pretty accurate because we are actually going to stitch around these. So let's get rid of this. That's the lining pieces. We're going to fuse the fleece over the top of the interfacing on the reverse of the fabric pieces. So when we do this, we need to leave approximately 1/4 inch margin all around. And then we're going to fuse in exactly the same way as we did the interfacing. So damp cloth, dry, medium iron. And that's all done. We're ready to start sewing. So step 1 doesn't actually involve any sewing, but it does involve something very important, which is marking and positioning our magnetic snaps. Now, your magnetic snaps should have a washer, and it should have 2 sections. The ones that I use are different thicknesses, so you've got a very thin one and one with a little bit of thickness, which you can just see there. So I like to put the thinnest one on the flap and the thicker one on the base, the case. So first thing we're going to do, we need to mark them on the correct pieces. So I've put a line there so that you can fold your pattern in half. And you place it down, take your washer and position it over the circle. Now if you put your finger down on the side that is not over the pattern, pull the pattern away, and then we're going to use our fabric marker to just draw those 2 lines. So we'll do this one first, which is the lining. So I'm using a seam ripper, but you could actually just fold it in half and use some tiny scissors if you have some. So we poke it in, literally rip up to the top, like that. Turn it over, and then I'm going to feed our prongs through, put the washer on and bend. This takes a little bit of effort, but there we go. That's that side done. So on the case, we're marking it on the back through the fusible fleece. And there we go. We're ready to go to step 2. So this step also has very little sewing. We are going to make our strap connector. So we've got our little piece here, which is 2 inches by 2 inches, and we are going to fold and press it to turn it into the piece we want. So first of all, fold it in half and press the crease. Then fold one side into the middle and press it. Obviously mind your fingers when you're doing this. Fold the other side into the middle. Like so, and then finally fold it all back in and press. Now you can stitch down the edges of both of these sides if you want to, but there's no real need to. So the next thing we're going to do is going to take our tiny little 1/2 inch D-ring. We're going to thread it on. And fold it in half. Just going to secure the end with a clip to hold it together. Then we're going to take our case. So we're working on the outer, and you can see here there's a mark for the connector position. Now, one good tip for marking positions is to cut it out and fold it back. Then I'm going to mark that with my fabric marker. You just about see it in the blue. I'm going to position that where I've marked. Clip it on for now, and then I'm going to take that over to the machine and stitch just quite near to the edge, so about 1/8 of an inch in. That's just going to secure it in position so that we can stitch the rest of the seam. So I'm just going to attach the strap connector to the case. You can see I'm using the edge of my machine here because the needle goes down in this place here. If I put the edge of my machine foot to the edge of the strap connector, I know that's around 1/8 of an inch. Now I'm actually going to use a hump jumper here, but you don't have to. And my method is I always start stitching in the middle of the strap connector first to stop the two edges from sliding against each other. So I'm also going to use this awl so that you can see and I'm not getting my hands in front of the work. And I'm also using a thread in a different colour so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. You can see there it's attached. That also gives it a little bit of extra security for when it gets pulled in use. Now we're going to stitch everything together. So here we are about to stitch together the flap with the flap lining and the outer with the case with the case lining. And so what I'm going to do is first of all match all the edges and place them right sides together. Now we need to leave a turning gap of approximately 3 inches in both of the pieces on the straight edge. So I have drawn my start and stop positions on first because I'm terrible for forgetting. So I'm using a 1/4 inch foot here, but obviously you can just follow the edge of the fleece. So start off by stitching forward a bit and then back stitching. and then we're going to stitch around. When you get to the tighter curves, keep stopping and lifting your foot. You can see I've got a knee lift here so you don't have to see my hands in the way, and go around in small bites. There we go. Second piece stitched. So we'll go over and trim the seams and turn through. So we've completed our stitching together, so everything's joined, and now we are going to trim things so that when we turn them through they will look perfect. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim off corners. Try not to get too close to the corner itself, because you will then find yourself with little fronds poking through. So I'm going to do this on all of the corners. And then there are two ways of dealing with the curved edges. Now with a curved edge you need to notch or put something, little cuts into the curve so that you can control it when it turns through and so it doesn't pucker. So you can either go along and do tiny little triangles like this. So little triangular notches, so that when the curve is turned through, you can see you've got a bit more space there for the seam to actually sit flat. The other option, and the one that I usually do, is to use some pinking shears. Now, if you don't have any of these, I would suggest you get yourself to a charity shop or anywhere you like and just pick a pair up, because they are so useful. So that has automatically notched the seam for me. So when I turn it through, it should sit nice and flat. So I'm going to do the flap as well, and then we'll turn through. So before we actually turn through, the first thing we're going to do is quickly press this seam open. Now you can finger press it, and by that I mean you sort of score it with your fingernails until it sits nice and flat, but it is easier to use an iron. Obviously being careful you've got it at the right temperature so it doesn't melt your interfacing. So I'm going to do that on both of these turning gaps. So now I've got two options for what we're going to use to help us turn through. This is a point turner, a bamboo one that I have, which is an actual sewing tool. This, you might recognise, is a chopstick. So if you don't have one of these, because you're still in the process of accumulating sewing gadgets, I would suggest just use one of these. Whatever you do, do not just poke through the corners with your scissors, because even though they might look like they're blunt, that tip is sharp enough that it's going to ruin your work. So there we go. So I'm going to turn through the flap and then we're going to press these ready for top stitching. And there we go. So we will go and top stitch. So we are now going to top stitch. So the first thing I do, which you can't see because it's off camera, is I'm going to turn my machine up. Now I've turned it up to 3. If you've got one with dials, then just turn it to quite a large stitch. There we go. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to pop it under the foot. Now you've got different ways that you can actually begin. I'm also going to use my hump jumper, because as you know, I like my hump jumper because it makes things run smoothly, because the back of the foot is up at the same height as the front of the foot. So I have a stitch on my machine that just does like back stitching, but all in one place. So I'm going to use that stitch, but you can back stitch, or you can leave long thread ends and stitch them in on the back afterwards. So we're ready to go. So just basically, I've done the same thing as before. I'm working about 1/8 of an inch in, so I've got the edge of my foot that I'm following. And then when you get to the end, use the same method to finish off. There we go. So I'm now going to do the bottom, and this will actually close the turning gap as well. If you don't have a hump jumper, you can use a chopstick, a bit of card, just something to lift up the back of the foot to the same height as the front. There we go. Now it's the same process for going around the strap, the flap, but you will probably have to stop and start a lot more. So each time you get to a curve, lift up your foot, do a couple of stitches, and then do the same again. There we go. So we're going to have a little recap. This is what we've got so far. If I can bring this up and find the light. Top stitched at the top, and at the bottom straight edge on the case, and on the flap we've top stitched all the way around the curve but left the straight edge unstitched. You can see on the back I've used a contrast thread. You could actually change out your bobbin thread if you wanted to. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our outer flap piece, and we're going to turn this around. Now you can see on here I've drawn on the position for the flap, and as you know how I like to throw things on the floor, just ignore that bit. How I like to put my markings on or just add things is to cut down the section and fold it back. So you can see, of course, we've stitched this case together. So we take off the seam allowance. So that little line there, that dashed line, is actually the edge of our piece. So just check you've got it in the right place. It looks pretty even. And what we're going to do, we're going to take our flap, turn it around and just pop it in that gap there. Now what I'm going to do first, before I do anything with glue to hold it, is just check that I've got it even, which it looks pretty even. You can get a ruler if you want to just double check. So I'm mainly making sure the flap's in the correct position. So it should be about 1/4 of an inch or thereabouts in from each edge, which it is, and 1/2 an inch down, which it is on that side. Yep, which it is on this side. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to apply a little bit of glue. I'm going to do it on the case rather than on the flap to make sure it doesn't get seen and go over the edge. I'm not going to put it all the way along. This is just to hold it in place because obviously we can't clip. What we can do is clip just the edges, which I'm going to do. There we go. So you can see from the inside it's covered that top edge. Now what we're actually going to do is stitch across, but literally just underneath where this line is here. Now I know on my sewing machine, if I put the edge of the foot against this line, it will stitch in the perfect position. So we're going to stitch around in a box and that will hold everything together. I will go over to the sewing machine. So we're ready to stitch along, and we're going to do it exactly the same as we did the previous lot of top stitching. This time I'm going to position my foot of my machine just at the edge here, and we're going to stitch across. Now most of the time it's around 3/8 of an inch to the needle from the edge of the foot, so that is going to be fine because we know that our flap is 1/2 an inch down. So I'm going to start with the hump jumper just to make sure I get the nicest finish I can. Oops, sorry, not the camera. And I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to just start with the locking stitch. And I'm going to stitch straight across to the other side. As I said, if you're not sure that you're going to be able to stitch in a straight line or stitch in the correct place, then it would be very easy to just use a bit of chalk or your fabric marker that we used before to draw a line. So I've got to where the previous line of top stitching was. I'm going to go forwards. Let's see if that looks about right. I'll go one tiny stitch further forward. And then I'm going to stitch back along. And then we'll finish off. So that's both the turning gaps closed. You can see our nice neat stitching there. And then from the inside, that's what it looks like. So the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to fold our sides up. I'm going to put just the one clip in, and then we're going to start stitching at the top and stitch all the way down to the bottom. So definitely need your hump jumper for this, because otherwise it won't start stitching properly. I'm actually going to back stitch it as well at the bottom here. That's one side done. We'll do the other side. Now you need to do both sides from the top down to the bottom. So you might need to use the other side of your foot. You might also need to fold up the rest of the flap so it fits nicely under your machine. There we go. Find my hump jumper. There we go. So it looks a bit squashed at the moment, but we'll take it back over to the table and pop it out and finish this bit off before we do our strap. So here we have our finished case. You can see I've got lots of little ends to snip off or potentially sew in if that's what you need to do with your machine. And we're ready to put our glasses in. Now I suggest when you shape it, if you actually put some glasses in before you do it up for the first time, it makes it a lot easier. So you can see this will lift out. Let's pop my glasses in. And then, oops. Of course, I've taken my glasses off so I can't see now. That's it. That's our finished case, so we're just ready for the strap. So we're going to make the strap the starting point, the folding part, in exactly the same way as our strap connector. So fold it in half, press it, open it out, fold the middle into the centre, press that, and then we do the other side. And then finally we fold it and do it all again. So we're nearly ready to go over to the machine. But before we do that, we need to take our little swivel hook and we're going to tuck it onto the strap. Now everything else we do, all the stitching, happens with this swivel hook on. So we're going to trap it in position. So the first thing we're going to do is open out just the ends and clip them together, and we're going to take it over to the machine and stitch with a 1/4 inch seam. So you can see I've changed into my 1/4 inch foot, and the next thing I'm going to do is switch my sewing stitch length down, just to make sure that we don't end up with very loose stitches on the end here. So I'm just going to stitch at 1/4 inch. Try not to get my hands in the way, because otherwise it will track my hands and not what I'm sewing. Now we need to press this open, so I'm going to finger press it here. And then I need to fold it all back up again. Now, of course, I've just locked the focus on this, so if I get too far forwards it will blur, and I do apologise. Here we go. That will do. So what I'm going to do now is change my foot back out for my ordinary machine foot. I like to use this clear one. A lot of people like to use the one that comes with the machine, and the important thing is to get used to where to position your foot to get the perfect stitching. So we're going to stitch around all in one go. So I'm going to start here where the seam is, and there's a reason for that. I'll show you when we get to that. Now on my machine, the right setting to get a good edge stitch is just where that little triangle is. I don't know if you can see it on the foot, and there's like a little line, a little gap there, and that is absolutely perfect for the kind of stitching we're going to do. Right, let's turn my machine back up, and I'm going to start mine with the lock stitch. And then once you've got your needle down, you can pull it out straight to help you stitch a nice straight line. And here we go. Now when you get close to the swivel hook, all you have to do is pull it down so it's at the other end again. Needed a little bit of help to get it back over the bump there. And now we get back to our seam line, and lift everything up, and then we're going to stitch across the seam line because that's a pretty good way of hiding the stitching. And then I'm going to turn it round. I'm still stitching the same side. You can see the actual wrist strap is on the other side of the foot. And then stop in the same place that you started, but on the other side. So you can see there we've got nice neat stitching all the way around. I've got these little fronds on the inside. What I'm going to do now is pull the swivel hook, make sure that it's sitting nicely on your strap, and I'm going to position the seam line approximately 1/2 inch up from the swivel hook, from the fold. I'm going to tuck these ends in. Now what we're going to do, we'll definitely need the hump jumper here. Pop the hump jumper underneath, position that, and like we did with the strap connector, I'm going to start in the centre so that the edges don't shift against each other. And going to reverse back. If your hump jumper drops down like mine just has, just pick it back up and tuck it in again. Sometimes you're lucky and it doesn't, but there we go. And back to the middle. And there we go. So here we have our finished strap. You can see that's our stitching. I've taken off all the ends, and now we just attach it to our D-ring. Pop our glasses in. And there we go. One finished gorgeous glasses case. So congratulations to you, you have finished. Now, this is the one I made in the video. You can obviously customize it to make it your own. So if you want to take off the strap and the connector, you can. This one is made all in one fabric, but it's a lovely thing to make in 2 different fabrics, particularly if you have a lovely fabric you want to showcase on the flap. That makes it very scrap friendly as well. I have other videos on my channel. Please like this one. Please subscribe if you want to see more. I'm trying to put some more shorts on when I have the time, so keep an eye out for those as well. Other than that, happy sewing to you.